November. Welcome to the November 4th, 2024 meeting of the Mobility Planning and Coordination Committee. As a reminder, this meeting is being broadcast to the town's YouTube channel, also via Zoom. And is being recorded for publication, later viewing and administrative purposes. I haven't been notified by anybody else that they are recording this meeting. So let's take a roll call.
James, here's Justin.
Mo Handel here. James Goldstein,
Here.
Gus Bryson.
Your timing is incredible.
Sorry. Duncan Allen.
There he is.
I think I'm connected now.
I heard him presence. Justin McCollum.
Present.
Tyler Gabrielski.
Present.
Shane Mark.
Present.
And Alexander Klee is also online. Paul Molta and Stephen Frail said they will attend, but they may pop in a little bit later.
You like one on tonight?
First order of business is to approve the minutes from October 17th, 2024. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Any discussion?
So move.
Second,
There is no motion yet.
I moved the motion.
Second from Alan Duncan, so we'll vote on that. Mo Handel,
Yes.
James Goldstein,
Yes.
Gus Bryson,
Yes.
Chair votes aye. Justin McCollum
Abstain.
and Duncan Allen.
aye.
It passes. The next item on our agenda is the bike plan and map continued from last time. And with the proposed streets, spreadsheets and visual representation. I had sent around a list that was included in the packet of proposed areas for bike lanes and some the neighborways and the bicycle boulevards, some off-street trails, and some intersections based on our comments from last time. And is there any discussion? We're gonna have a chance to review. I think the main point, a lot of comments I heard was we want to see it kind of visualized on a map somehow. And I think there's some question about whether or not we'd be able to like have the GIS person somehow integrate that in a way that it can be viewed by everybody.
Yeah, so, I think we just need to take some notes on what exactly we want, to be represented visually. Like if we want there to be a difference in, because there's different types of things here. Like if we want the trails in a certain color or whatever, and because we can just take this first sheet and then make that all one layer.
Okay,
And then I guess the other question would be, do we want any distinction within that to be represented differently?
sure. Is there any discussion on that from?
Yeah, I would say you've got 4 columns and you're not gonna really be able to represent 4 dimensions on a map. And my personal leaning would be towards showing something physical, i.e. width versus functional classification, because I think, or purpose or something else. I think at most you can represent 2 things. You could do one thing with color and another thing with, line weight or dashed but I don't think you can meaningfully represent more than 2 variables on a map.
Not simultaneously, but we can have layers.
Yeah.
That can be toggled.
Right.
If we are gonna do
two on one. Obviously, the location itself and perhaps color coded, but I think the infrastructure concept is really important because they're quite different. Depending on location and somehow either on a layer or on the two item single layer, that should be included.
Okay.
Well, what you could do, for example, would you have a layer? Let's say you have 20 feet is brown, 25 feet is another color. And then you can combine those, or
Yeah.
you mean combine other layers.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm sure it can handle that.
Do we have an example of anybody else who's done this? Then we can look at that and see how well it works and whether it would work for us.
Sure.
It depends what you mean by this. It reminds me very much of something we've recently completed for the MBTA for their bus network redesign, and we had a really complicated multi-level thing which people could toggle stuff on and off, whether it was, a busy bus route, whether it was, the frequency, the frequency of the buses, whether or not it had met certain other criteria, and you could flip those on, and even weight them and create a very, complicated rendering. If I can find that website, which won't happen in the context of this meeting, but there was actually a tool the MBTA built where you could, users could pop on there and play with it to their own satisfaction, balancing the different variables.
There it is.
It's a complicated thing to build, but
Yeah, I
Can be
don't,
cut.
are we looking for, like, there's a lot of information, I guess you could include in this, but I think is the visualization, are you just looking, I think, to see where, because I think the select board, where we started this was to see where we're channeling bike traffic from. So, like, just to kind of have an idea of if we did all of this, which it won't happen at once, like where does it make a cohesive network of places to, induce bicycling from different areas to different pieces of infrastructure, so.
Does it make sense to start with a more basic map and then go from iterations on that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes, and that would
'Cause I
help the
think-
public understand what we're looking at. As well as the select board.
And in the Brookline thing that you circulated, there is such a map. And
There is, yeah.
this one seems to me pretty simple, but I haven't looked at all.
Yeah, I didn't look at that as much. Somerville has one. They spent, I think Somerville's bicycle network plan is a bigger document maybe than Brookline. But it kind of boils down to a very small map of Somerville and where they have proposed bikeways and bike lanes. And I don't know if they denote like whether or not the bike lanes are protected or if they're just on street lanes.
And Brookline will have at least two. One is protected.
Okay, while we're on that subject, can I say something that's related? On my way home from the last time we met, there were either 2 or 3 commercial residential barrels parked in the bike lane on Dedham Street. I think that we should be making an effort while we're going through all of this to make sure that when we do this, nobody leaves stuff in the bike lane.
Yeah. Maybe that's something that
It's a
TSC,
footnote to this, obviously.
yeah, TSC can mention it to Lieutenant McGrath. I don't know what precedents we have for enforcing.
I use that.
Sorry, can I say something? Or-
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, sorry. I think that I think we're coalescing around a more of a basic map that because we can make future iterations regarding how wide the streets are, whether they're protected or not. But I think we need to, if we're going to look at a bike map, we need to kind of say, well, this is where we want to. This is where we want to see throughput. This is where we want to see, bikes coming from Wellesley to Newton to Dover to whatever, the interconnectivity, how they're going to connect to each other, and then also through the town centers and the heights. commercial districts so that we can see a flow and we can see kind of like a concept, an aspirational concept. So I think that's like the first GIS map we want to do, and then we can kind of go forward with, you know, whether we do that protected lanes or unprotected lanes. With regards to the parking, so state law is state law. So there is precedent. It's state law it's a ticketable offense. We haven't done it in Needham, but and
That's what I meant.
so that's one of the things the we need to be careful about, and I know I've mentioned it a couple times. When you put a bike lane down, you're putting a parking restriction down. That's why I think on Webster there's no bike lanes. It was on Facebook saying that suddenly there are these bike lanes that are gone. They were never there to begin with, and they're not there now because that would have to be, I think that should be socialized through the residents to say, you can no longer park on Webster Street. You may have for the last 75 years, but you know, just because we put a stripe down and put the bike symbols down, we are doing in essence a parking restriction. We did that on High Rock, and I still see people parking on High Rock in a bike lane. Our police haven't been instructed to enforce Massachusetts state law, but we need to be careful with how we roll this out. That we need from a public education campaign. I'm all for doing bike lanes, but we need to do it the right way so that we don't have people not know that they're losing their parking and then be faced with an issue of throwing it to the police officers to enforce, when in reality, because yes, that is the law. The law is you cannot park in a bike lane. But we can't just apply bike lanes without people knowing that they can't park there anymore. So it's kind of an education component.
I agree with Justin, but as somebody who's lived on Webster for 37 years, I think I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen people parked on Webster, except for the area across from the field where there are defined line spaces. People don't park on Webster.
Yeah, I think what
High Rock
Justin-
is they're doing on a High Rock, but yeah, Mark.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark.
I think what Justin just said, like, we will start with like an aspiration concept of where they're, and then, like, I think when we get into it, or when it comes up on a paving or, you know, some sort of list where it may be worked on, and then you can discuss afterwards, like, is it appropriate? Like,
Right.
are we actually gonna do it when it comes, and maybe that's a no. Maybe, but this is where we want them to go. And
Yeah, it looks like Gus, you may have done this already. kind
this
of.
is me, yeah, this
Oh,
is when
that's
I
you.
started
Oh.
making it, yeah,
And
I
it
mean-
should show where the connection to the other communities are.
yeah. Correct.
What are the different colors on that they?
This, that was just one that yeah,
But I mean,
It's just rainbow bright?
yeah, rainbow, yeah, whatever my kids were coloring with in the
But
morning.
this is, I think, what Justin is referring to as, what are the 16 locations
Basic, yes.
that you're talking about? At least that they're represented there, and if that could be put into the JS, at least we could share that easily.
Yeah,
As the starting point.
follow-up question
Good
to
point.
that. Do we want the existing on the same map,
Yes,
separate map, toggle back and forth? Like,
I think that existing should be there as a kind of, because it's already
like
there,
the,
so
like the
it's
base.
Maybe in a different color than.
a different
than the
color than.
aspirational ones.
Yeah, but then you have again a different layer.
Well, you could have a base map which includes that, and then the layers would be
Yes.
what you're talking
Okay.
about.
Yeah,
I do wanna just comment quickly on the bike lane, the parking thing. So, I definitely agree that there should be a public education component. I think it might be appropriate for, you know, with with the committee's support and help, for police to work with us on that public education aspect, because they do have pretty active social media that can help us. You know, I think that because it's a enforcement issue, it's not gonna mean as much coming from DPW.
it's also a safety issue, obviously, and I assume Justin's safety committee would also somehow have a role.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's also an added burden on the police. So that needs to be taken into
but
account.
I think
Yeah,
if
we have to
we,
take that.
because this committee is going to speak before the select board before the end of the year, or at least that's what they would like. I think it might be a good point to bring up that so that they can help us because if it comes to the top, from the top, I feel like.
Yeah.
I think that we have the opportunity to discuss parking for each of the situations as they arise.
Yeah.
When we're kind of hashing out the final details of what each street may look like, and if they're, like a checklist. Is there reasonable parking alternatives? Like, what is the actual parking that's being lost? Historically, is this a street that people park on often? And then we're considering that, like, we're not just letting that go and say we're gonna do this wherever. But clearly we'll have a discussion or at least some thought or some sort of policy to determine whether or not the loss of parking is warranted. And I think there's actually probably some opportunities where we can add parking to places where people don't park now, and so,
And
No, I mean,
have
it's true, because, I'm sorry. I mean, like, even like Garden Street, as certain roads that are closer to the center of town are gonna have to be like looked at in terms of, because obviously yes, we have parking. The parking study showed that we have parking, it just maybe not be convenient, but nonetheless, that is all part of the equation for how we market this and how we, because I think we need to definitely, I'm all in favor of doing more bike lanes, promoting this, but we also have to really be careful on how we sell this and market this to the community. So by removing parking on, Garden Street, we need to make sure that there's alternative parking somewhere else. And, to your point, yes, I think there's opportunity to create more parking in certain areas, and then maybe to shift or move to promote, bike lanes on other areas. So
I had a question and then a comment so we have existing bike lanes. Have we memorialized those bike lanes? Is there a process that we have? Because my understanding is the bike lanes we have now, we've made these decisions that through our roadway work, we've looked at opportunities from DPW to put bike lanes, but we haven't done anything officially to memorialize that as an official recognized bike lane. So do we have a process for that? Because that kind of goes along with what Justin says, is there are state laws for this, but without potentially memorializing these areas or officially dedicating these as official bike lanes, does it make it harder if police does need to enforce it, if that
So-
makes
So Shane, I mean, my understanding is the marking memorializes it.
market
The
itself.
actual, like you did on Central Ave, where right now there
Yeah.
is a 3.5 mile or 3 mile, whatever, parking prohibition on Central Ave that just kind of snuck in last year when you repaved it and relined it. I still see cars parked, sporadically on it, but that's one thing about it. But my understanding is the memorialization, the making it real is the small little
The symbol
bike,
itself.
the bike lane markings that are on
Yeah,
them,
as soon as-
because some of the streets don't have them, like, you know what I mean? And so they're not like Webster, they don't have them because it's not official bike lanes, but Central Ave is an official bike lane.
And then the second follow-up on that is, as we're talking about this, the communication piece. And communicating what our plan is here in Needham when it comes to a bike network. We've got the existing document that the Bike Advisory Committee put together in October of 2000. It seems to me we're 24 years later. In order to do this, we have a decent framework. But I would suggest that document needs updating to convey current thinking of where we want to go with our bike network here in Needham, and that could include potentially where the existing bike lanes are. Where we're looking to install future bike lanes. Etc. Because, kind of goes along with this map, the map could simply just be a visual representation with a legend for what the different colors mean. And then the bike plan itself spells out what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. An update to the existing bicycle plan that we're doing now.
Tyler had a
Yeah.
comment on that.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think that in terms of the map, we may want to do, we may want to err on the side of simplicity, and then the actual specifics about, like you said, like the parking, what the actual infrastructure may end up being, its form. Maybe that goes in the written plan as like this is what we would like to do. And that is that's how the spreadsheet, what's written on the spreadsheet gets memorialized. And then the map can kind of be. Because I think if we get too granular with it, it's not gonna be as useful as a visual reference.
A couple comments. Justin said that once you stripe a bike lane, that's it. I don't know whether DPW coordinated that with the police, but if not, it seems that that does have to happen if there is going to be enforcement. And I'm not suggesting there has to be enforcement, but I'm saying if there is, there has to be coordination even with the existing, because it sounds like it didn't happen in the way that we're talking about, a protocol to, have the police do education and then, so that's one comment. Secondly, Tim has raised the issue and he has a list of these streets in his handouts of these neighbor ways, which are not bike lanes, as I understand it, but in my view, should be on this map, at least a layer on the map, because that's where a lot of the connectivity is going to come from. But as far as I understand this concept, bike lanes are not required. These are low traveled, but good connectors like Fair Oaks Park, like Warren, etc. So I think those should be on the base map or on a layer, but be included for connectivity reasons, not for striping or any infrastructure, actually.
So should that be the same? Like a different layer on the same map,
Different color.
different color, but on the same layer as the dedicated or, the infrastructure.
Of the existing ones? I think it doesn't really make a big difference.
Yeah, I would probably put it in a different color than the existing ones. And I think the neighbor way opportunity, like there's a branding opportunity there. So although they may work now in their current configuration, there may be like, some sort of branding or dedicating that officially as a bikeway. I think Fair Oaks Park, I think it has the signs on it now. That was part of the original plan, but, that's Steven too, Steven.
I did ask him to become a panelist, but maybe it didn't work.
Mo,
I think we should just review for a second. Who was the primary audience at the first cut for this map? And design it for that and then layer in subsequent audiences.
Make it an iterative process.
Because you may certainly want to end up with a map you can hand people who put on the web where people are biking through Needham. That's one. But the primary audience, I think, is the people in the town who manage this process. So the first thing we should figure out is, what do we need to show the select board and the police and the DPW about what we're thinking? And then get feedback and then design the map further. And then there's the public. You want the public to understand what people are talking about before it gets striped.
Good point, yes.
Can I just make 2 points? On that October 2000 bicycling plan. I think, well, first of all, I think the pages are out of order.
Yes.
But there's a reference on, let's say, called old page 6, on the top there, talks about a map. Do you know what that map looks like?
Yeah, I think it's a base map of this, isn't it?
It's basically, it's similar to what Tyler handed us. What page?
It's the current page 6. It says, it starts with streets wide enough for bike lanes.
Yeah.
The very top line.
It looks like Steven's got his hand up.
Yeah.
For sure.
Steven,
It's the
I would
second
look
to
for
last
it.
page.
Yeah, thanks, guys. though I wasn't a panelist yet, I was listening actually for the last 10, 15 minutes. And Mo, I think, articulated for me what I was hoping to ask, which is the purpose of the map and the purpose of the, more broadly, the safe streets, the bikes is to improve safety. But the map's not going to do that, and the stripes aren't going to do that unless the town is collectively ready. And I'm wondering, where does the change management aspect of things like where you can park, where you can't park, what are safe cycling practices and not safe cycling practices, and what are safe passing practices for vehicles, where does that sit in the town? Is that this group, or is that the select board, or is there some other entity in town that's responsible for taking these plans and then converting it into a change management plan for drivers and cyclists and pedestrians?
I think that this group is really kind of focused on the infrastructure and the transportation planning, the like enforcement and some of that education, although it's part of it. I think our like this group here, when the streets are being worked on, it's information from this group about, like how to make the mobility of the town better, in a better way. I don't think that that's necessarily like information wise about, like enforcement or like necessarily educating people about how to use the roads themselves. I think our influence is to influence the infrastructure that's being built so that it's intuitive to the users, that it's safe and comfortable and
But Stephen's question remains,
Yeah.
where does the
Where does-
change
Yeah.
management aspect happen? Is it, select board in conjunction with DPW and the police? Is it, I don't know. I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
And I think it gets to Mo's point of the audience, right? So when we present something, we can say, hey, you can stripe it, you can do all of these changes, but as Tim and I both know, people are still getting hit by cars in places they shouldn't be getting hit by cars. And how do we make sure whoever's responsible for that change management is aligned with us early, but long before the lanes get striped? That's something that I'm puzzling on.
I'm a little unclear on what information you mean, like reference guides for existing laws on the books, like tips about safe biking. I'm not sure what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
So it's as Justin was saying earlier about, before you take away parking, making sure that those abutters know that parking is going to be taken away and they're going to have to find alternative plans, and maybe even the town helping them with those alternative plans, so we don't run into situations where people are parking in bike lanes. But I think the same thing would be true if you put in a bike lane where there wasn't one before, or a sharrow like we have on Dedham Ave, and people don't understand that you can go over the yellow line when you're passing a cyclist. You're still going to have people trying to pass too closely and striking cyclists. That's the type of thing that I'm wondering if the big picture, as we're focusing on the infrastructure, we're also figuring out who are the partners in other parts of the town administration that we need to be bringing along, so that they can figure out what other programs or communication strategies they need to help make sure that the infrastructure that's built actually delivers the safety benefits that it's intended to build. That's my question.
Sure. Well, I mean, some of that is public information, Stephen, and we know that that's probably a gap.
Yeah.
I know we have a PIO, and I know it's recorded, but it's a gap. And yes, it is. We do need to work. We do need to work on what an actual bike lane means, an education component of you can't park in the bike lane. I think that we also probably, I was speaking to Tim too a couple days ago, we, probably need to switch from the yellow advisory share the road signs to the regulatory black and white 4-foot vulnerability law signs as well, to, just to remind people. It also then gives the police an additional an additional indicator that they can cite people for passing less than 4 feet from a vulnerable user, even though they can anyways. But at least it makes it even easier from adjudication perspective if someone does choose to petition the violation. But yes, so I think that yes, but I think to your point, this is going to be from this committee. I think this committee is going to be the one responsible for the map. To Mo's point, yes, the map is for us, because and actually when I was talking to Tim, the map is for me. And when I say me, it's us, because I really wanted to know, what are we trying to do, rather than, because I see this bike plan on, the information, the spreadsheet, but I'm a visual person. I want to see what we're trying to convey. We're trying to allow a safe passage from cyclists from Newton to Dover, from Dedham to Boston to this, and also visiting the town center and the commerce areas. How do we then visualize that with both bike lanes, regulatory bike lanes, and then also these other greenway? Oh, not the greenways. I'm sorry, Tim. What did you call them? They're
We haven't decided yet, yeah.
yeah, so we can brand it the way they do in kind of Somerville or whatever, that we call them, like, just areas that we promote to say that there are going to be cyclists that will be on these areas, Manning Street, that, are less trafficked but yet, would be considered a thoroughfare for throughput. And that's really what the genesis, at least from me, of what this map was for. This map is for so that I can say, we want to take bike traffic from Wellesley to Newton and through the town center, or through what is the safest area. And then what do we think are the safest areas? And then we can work on, from a markings perspective, from, signage and markings, how do we then make that more safe? And then through our public outreach, how do we then, take that and convey that to the actual, motorists that are out there? So so the map, to me, I'm not talking about a map as an end user map that we give to the public. That will come organically after we figure out where we think. So it's really I forget who said it, but it really comes down to redoing our cycle vision and our cycle aspiration that we did in 2000. 24 years ago, and really renew that with with information and where we want to be aspirationally as a town, to be promoting multimodal transportation. So that's
Yes.
And in that regard, I find the Brookline report that you circulated quite useful as a model. I mean, not everything in here. It does raise one question for me about existing bike lanes and so forth, because they, I think, rightly emphasize the school routes. And I know we have safe routes identified for schools, I believe, but I thought they were for walking primarily, not necessarily biking. But that seems to be a very important focus to include in what we're doing. So kids,
That's actually a really good point, James, because I had a note here to bring this up. Josh, who is currently a select board member, has been asking for that. So when we met out in March on Webster, when we were gonna do the work, bike lanes came up about Webster, and we explained why we weren't putting bike lanes down. As part of that meeting, several of the members that were there asked, and Josh piggybacked on this, if we could put together a preferred, I don't know what to call it, a preferred cycling map for getting the students to Needham High School. And so I had jotted a note here that this seems like if we're tackling this beast of a bike network and a bike plan, we'd also want to take a look at, and chunking it out, I would say the high school, High Rock, and Pollard to start off with. Cause that's most of the kids you see biking currently are the middle school and the high school, but. Looking at how do we get the kids, or what's the preferred route that we want kids and cyclists to take that are going to the schools? And then just to kind of tag on the question that Steven said, I was just looking at the charge here, and I agree with what James and Justin were saying. It, I think that starts with us, but it also is in coordination with the TSC and with Amy as the Director of Communications and Community Engagement. She's town resource to help us push that messaging out. But I think that our charge, and just looking at what this group is responsible for, is it's really the coordination of the plans and the communication to the other Transportation Safety Committee, also the Rail Trail Committee, the Select Board. So I don't think it lands in just one wheelhouse. I think it lands in several. And that each one of those are gonna have a piece in communicating that outwards, and using Amy as our conduit to get that out in the news you need them, and then publications and that engagement piece, if you will.
So I agree. I do think that there's a challenge in what is the suggested route to the high school? Okay, from where?
Exactly.
Well, it has to be
Well,
everywhere,
you
that's
know,
the whole point. Yeah.
Okay, well, so how do we say this is a suggested route to the school? When it could be from any direction, I don't.
Yeah, I
understand.
think yes, they're very good points, getting kids to school, is a part of this. They're probably gonna be one of the biggest user groups of some of these, if you were able to implement it. They will come from everywhere. So, I think that the goal would be is to have a complete network that reaches most of our residents.
Right, that's,
And
this is
yeah,
more
yeah.
important, because those are the routes, the
Yes.
network.
Yeah. I think we can connect to other towns, but if we're, really thinking about who would be the users of, some of this infrastructure, which should be really the goal, like the end goal down the line. There's ever money for it, is that they're protected and they're safe and they're inviting. They're constructed in a way where you can't park a car on there, where a car can't enter into this, this space. So, all of those things can be hashed out with either design or engineering in the end, and it's safe and it's everywhere so that everybody, can kind of get to the high school, yes.
While we're talking about this at this stage, we need to, I think, start to think about the sign implications of all of this. Because as you drive around this town, there are so many signs, they all disappear. And there is no information that anybody will see. There's too much visual noise. We need to develop a policy on anything we're doing here that conveys the information to drivers and bicyclists without creating a chaotic visual information assault on people's consciousness.
I think you can.
At the moment, there's a standard for that. Those are all standard. Those are all federal and state standards for what you can and cannot and should not do.
I'm sure that's true.
quantity
On
of-
Webster Street, for example, there's nothing but signs. And I don't think after a while anybody sees any of them.
Well, I think that's from years of people coming to TSC and asking us to put signs.
Whatever.
Everywhere all over town.
We need to be conscious of
The
that.
engineer.
No, of course, there's a balance of that. And sorry to interrupt. Of course, there's a balance, but I will press back a little bit and say that every sign that we're putting up is going to be compliant. There are signs in town that are not compliant. We'll be removing those and working with those, some of the blue and red ones. But nonetheless, these signs are the ones that are going up everywhere, all throughout the United States. They're put up in a certain, there's a certain standard to them. There is a certain colors, certain, frequencies. There are recommendations, best practices. And I believe that we do actually fall, I think we're undersigned in certain areas in the town, to be honest. And yes, there probably Dedham Ave is a little oversigned, but especially with the new pavement. But nonetheless, there are opportunities to optimize. To your point, but I think we're not necessarily, we don't, believe me, I've been in other towns, we are not oversigned. And you know, there are plenty of other communities that have significantly more signage and marking that leads to the overstimulation.
Right, James?
Getting back to the school routes, question, while I agree that ultimately the entire network has to be represented and safe and have all the criteria met that you mentioned, I think initially having, and I don't know what the radius might be, but closest to the high school, where everyone will ultimately come through. That could be, and Pollard and High Rock, the half mile closest to it could be the starting point to funnel people to those locations, and then at least starting there and then kind of building out is one way to prioritize or to think about prioritizing.
I think the map in general, I don't necessarily know that we'll be able to just make the map and then choose where we're gonna go and do all of this stuff at any given time, right? I think the purpose for now is to get it on the books so that when they come up for renovation, the roads, that we can, at that point, add infrastructure to that road that's being renovated next year. So I think it's kind of when I started this a couple weeks ago, when we got the list of the renovated roads for next year. And so on that list of roads, there are a few that you can connect to this map. And so this is the low hanging fruit where it's in the plan, so we can, that maybe makes it easier to go for grants for them, or, but like the funding's there, the road's being renovated, it's being restriped, what can we do to it to improve it at that point? And that might not be,
Right.
That's just what we happen to have.
It might not align, but as I understand it, some of these improvements, like showers and so forth, are very low cost, and we wouldn't have to wait for a resurfacing to do that with them, I would think, but the DPW folks can speak to that, but I'm not sure it's that limited, that it has to be up for,
No, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
just strictly resurfacing, we can.
As long as there's funding.
Yeah, as long as it's funding and the road's in good condition, Tim, the comment that you made and Tyler made, I think is a good point on this, is that I'm just simply bringing it to the attention of the committee that the select board, or at least one member of the select board, is very interested in having something to say, this is the way we want you to send your kids to school. And I think it's perfectly appropriate if we have a bike network and a bike plan with the map, I think it's perfectly appropriate to say, if you need this information, go to the map that we developed. I think that's perfectly acceptable to say, we just need to say, that's the way that we're encouraging people to, that's the resource we encourage people to use to, and then let each parent or each family determine with their child how that child's gonna bike to school. I think it's perfectly acceptable to do that.
Yeah, because if you make a map, then it's like, okay, well, this is the closest line to the school. As long as they're satisfied with, okay, this is the way you would go. So this is the shortest point. Like, I don't know how else you.
well, there's a big difference though, between having a map and pointing to a good route. And actually marking that route and having it, enforceable and so forth. And so, I think Josh is looking for more than just, here's a good way to go. I think he's ultimately looking for what we're trying to do here.
Here's a safe, here's a protected way
Right.
to go, here's the safest.
Yeah, and I agree, but what I would say is that's not something we're gonna be able to provide. DPW couldn't provide that in 6 months.
Oh, no, even.
No,
We
no,
could provide that in a year. I think what we're looking at is to say our goal, which DPW's goal is in alignment with what we're talking about here in this committee, is our goal is to provide a safe and sustainable bike network. But it's going to take time to get there.
Absolutely.
Because that's funding that it requires, and there's not just one way, so I think it goes to the communication that Stephen was talking about. the downtown revitalization for GPA, we're already looking at whether or not bike lanes could go in there or should go in there. That'll be communicated through the neighbors, the TIP project bike lane. So every project we're doing, we're looking at whether or not we could put bike lanes there, and then where it would be appropriate to provide the just markings or a actual physical separation to make it safe as well. So that's something that's already being done, but I think it's gonna take several years before we could provide
Especially
that.
when you're getting into protected, but I think we need to refocus on the point of this map here is aspirational. And it is a kind of a guide map for, this committee to, take a swing at, take a first draft, not the final draft, the first draft at, trying to say this is how a circulation should go. We can take schools into account. I probably would argue that we could drop High Rock because of it's going to turn back into a neighborhood school. So that its traffic patterns are not necessarily going to be coming downtown wide. Nonetheless, people aren't, but nonetheless, we can concentrate on Pollard and the high school. But, I think that's where we need to, I think, focus the attention is this aspiration that we want to, plan a bike friendly and safe network. And here's where we see areas that already currently exist, and then areas that we can perhaps expand using either dedicated, striped bike lanes, protected bike lanes, or these greenways, these whatever we end up calling them or branding them, to be able to help to facilitate multimodal traffic through commercial areas as well as schools, and then interconnects the towns. I think that's where this map is really for that purpose. And I think that's where we need to focus on, and then everything else will come afterwards. The communication, how we end up marking them, how we end up doing the logistics for the safety, making sure that we don't have like street drains that have like perpendicular, I don't think we do in this town, but that aren't like necessarily like cyclist death traps. But nonetheless, we need to look at this, and that's where it's this spreadsheet that Tim had put together, but to actually visualize that so they could all come from the same common operating picture and say, well, maybe we should say Manning instead of Webster, or maybe we should say this instead of that. Just visualize how we want to move bikes safely through town, because they're not right.
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
And in response to the select board and Josh in particular, I mean, we recognize this need, under development, and it's gonna take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
But I'm just preparing because to Tyler's point, the committee's going to be in front of the select board before this year's out, and that's going to be a question that'll come up, so just trying to prep the
We
committee.
can be prepared for that. And, honestly, I mean, this is where you as a town employee, maybe can't say this, but me, I can. We're advising the entire select board, not one individual in the select board. But yes, we need to be able to be prepared for, his concerns, and that's perfectly fine. There are other select board members that have also concerns, and, we need to be able to make a recommendation for a holistic bike plan that's going to be beneficial for everyone in town, and both students and and adults and children. So I think instead of trying to just because Josh wants something doesn't mean necessarily we need to go for it.
I mean,
No, and I'm not
we have to-
suggesting that.
And I know you're not, but I'm-
That's a question that Josh brought up, and I'm not suggesting that we tailor anything for one select board member. We are presenting this holistically and just, but he is on the select board, and that will come up, so
Yeah.
we have to
Yep.
just be
Agreed.
aware of that. Then
I'll get a
the
call
only last
tomorrow.
thing I would say is just, like with the communication and that sort of thing as well, as I have a note here. I'll talk to the police. I'm not sure if they do it or not, but I know a lot of communities will do like bike safety classes for the schools.
Mhm.
That's a good opportunity for us to also not only do that training and that bike safety communication to the kids, but also potentially to the parents of those kids as well,
Agreed.
so.
I have a question for, I think mostly Tim and Stephen maybe. In the Brookline plan, on the inventory of proposed and existing accommodations, they have two major designations, and I'm wondering if they're kind of state common and widely accepted. One is protected framework.
Yeah.
And the other is safe connecting streets. And then they also identify the with HI, the highly important intersections. We've already talked about intersections somewhat, but is that ultimately, not in this first cut, but is that ultimately what we're kind of aiming for? And would this even go into the framework that MAPC is helping with, these kind of designations?
Yeah, I believe, so protected, I believe they talk about their bike lanes eventually being protected, and the protected network are ones that are, you know, where they are physically separated, or they're raised, or there's some sort of, it's not just a painted lane on the road. And I think that the ultimate goal is yes, that is what.
Well, you wouldn't want that everywhere. That's just I would think a small fraction of the overall network, and the others would be these safe connecting streets.
Right, I think safe connecting streets are kind of the neighbor way. I think it's the same way that we were talking about those. The protected network, yes, I think, you know, especially if we're thinking like the spine of Highland Ave, that's gonna be protected. That's the most important place to have it. Protected place, but you know, I think if you're striping a lane on a road and it's 5 feet wide to be a bike lane, eventually at some point, because you can't park there, you can't, you know, it should be protected. I think whether that comes right away or that comes in 30 years, you know, it should be the ultimate goal, but.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think the opportunity that arises now may be just to stripe a bike lane on the side of the road, and that's designating that space for the future. It's not the best, it's not the safest, you're not gonna tell your child to ride in this little 4 or 5 foot lane. The paint isn't gonna protect that cyclist, so I think the ultimate goal is to put it down when we can. And then, you know, when the opportunity arises to protect it in the future, is to protect that. And, you know, maybe it starts small and there's more cycling traffic in different areas where you would focus that.
Is that widely understood around the table that ultimately all designated bike lanes, bikeways should be protected physically? I mean, I hadn't been thinking about it.
Yeah, well,
I thought there really was two kinds of bikeways, if you will. One protected and one not protected, and the not protected was okay because you can't protect everywhere, in some sense because of resources and other reasons.
I think it's ideal, but it's not always feasible depending
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not always gonna be possible, but the goal would be if it is, then you would entertain that, so.
I think
obviously,
that it will
that's
depend
more.
upon the categorization of the road, which is something that maybe will dovetail to another conversation of like, you know, our streets. I don't think like, I don't know, Manning Street or whatever, you know, if we end up doing like some sort of bike, would need to have a protected bike lane. But yes, depending upon the category of the street, which we could potentially use as a, you know, I know we're doing the street prioritization project. You know, that yes, certain streets we would target and say, yes, we would do a protected lane on a major collector or a protected lane on, you know, so that I think we can bring and integrate in, but I don't think the visualization to have every bike lane in town be protected. It's just not the reality of
It's not
things.
gonna happen. It's not a startup.
The classification would use that as, that would be one of the criteria that would be matched to the more arterial.
Right,
Classification.
that makes sense.
I mean, there's also, in terms of continuity, this is there may be an analogy with some of the bus priority treatments, like the, painting lanes pink and what have you. There is in the transit literature, some guidance relative to, how long they should be without interruptions or sort of minimum lengths and not breaking them up. So you have this, high-speed dedicated lane and then it, suddenly becomes, a yield to bus sign and some other kind of lower class of treatment. And, it's not a very, very formalized thing, but there's stuff out there sort of saying, you really shouldn't have a treatment that hopscotches from one thing to another with high frequency.
So you think you will be able to visualize this? Yeah.
To close the loop,
Yeah.
so I will get with engineering and talk with them. I know for a fact that I will be told that he's very busy, but perhaps with Shane and Karis, we can help prioritize his work and get this done. Because he just told me today that if it's filters and layers and lines on a map, he can do that in a couple hours. He just told me that. Not in reference to this project, but in general. So I will use that against him. I don't hesitate.
And that's what we're talking about, really, right?
Yeah, I think between either GIS or between our AutoCAD group, we could do this, because we also do this in AutoCAD.
Yeah, so engineering is, we'll talk to Tom. See what's
What
realistic.
it is worth. The Brookline started with just a map. No report,
Mhm.
and that lived for several years like that. And then I think, I don't know what the date was, 2000, whatever, it was in the 20s, right, 2020 or something like
Yes.
that.
Brookline's
And
2020.
They formalized it more, but in the beginning,
Mm,
Yeah,
they had a special bicycle group,
uh-huh.
citizen bicycle group, and they just started out with the plan, nothing else.
Right.
It was, as you just said, aspirational.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
anyhow,
you gotta start somewhere.
Yeah.
The map's the
I think
easiest.
that's where
Yeah.
we're,
And we may want to at least inform somebody like Pat Staley, who I think was the head of Bike Needham or Needham Bikes, whatever it was called, that was very involved in the 2020 plan. And he's still here and very active in the Bay County Rail Trail Association. I don't know who else was on that group, but one last question to the DPW folks. In the Brookline guide, it says projects that receive state or federal funding must comply with the controlling criteria and design justification process for Mass DOT Highway Division projects published in 2020. That document identifies specific criteria and a thorough design process for implementing bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. Is that well known to you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah, they won't give you the money unless you follow their rules,
okay,
typically.
And we are complete streets, we
Right.
adopted complete streets, so between the complete streets and tip projects that we're going after, we have to include these as part of our process.
okay.
And the more money that you want, the more strict they will be with their
Okay.
standards.
I'm glad you guys are up on it, because I was unfamiliar with this specific.
Yeah, cause they wanna make sure you're not doing like what Duncan said, where, you have a bike lane that goes for a half a block and then it
Yeah.
goes to a curb or something,
Yeah.
and will there be an opportunity to look at those roads that are being restriped or renovated next year? Is it
Yeah.
too late in the plan, or is it like,
No, I think it's a matter of working with engineering again to verify that we can physically accommodate the infrastructure. Smoothing out any other considerations that might be a problem, like parking or what have you, that might involve, depending on the impact, that might involve talking to abutters, or it might not. We might not need to, if it's kind of like not actually a parking lane, or not actually a parking area. And then depending on the scale of the project, it might require a design or not. If it does not, engineering may be able to help us lay out the markings. If it requires a design, then that's gonna require funding. And we'll have to match that to what we have available, either from our in-house budget or the shared streets grant applications are going to be accepted starting in a week or two. So we have an opportunity there. Keep that in your back pocket. We'll have they'll be accepting applications through the end of the calendar year, I believe.
There's also, safe routes to schools, as we talk about it, and some of those are like, I think they also have lines and signs and lines. And, another grant opportunity, and I think they provide technical assistance, so, should we be seeking those out for these projects yet, or is it like,
Yeah, so I looked into those programs for Harris Avenue. Because that was one of the spots to look. It is very conditional on the school in question's involvement with the Safe Routes to School program. So
they're all partners.
right,
Yeah.
so I had a call with the Safe Routes to School people. They told me Pollard Middle School is, on our list, but the school has not done any of the activities or events or what have you, and that is a condition of receiving funding.
Okay.
I strongly suspect that is born out of the fact that the elementary schools tend to have more involved parents. They tend to be more concerned with they're more likely to participate in the events and different. They do like one of the other things they look for is a how do you get to school survey, things like that. Like the Newman has done a bunch of those. Pollard has not done anything. So they basically told me until we can partner with the principal and try to make that happen, that it wouldn't be a candidate, because I was looking at that for the bike lane pilot or what have you. So that program's a little bit less more strings attached to it.
Okay.
Than some of the other programs. Shared streets, you basically just need to prove that you're improving multimodality and in accordance with their standards, and as long as it's relatively well thought out, you got a pretty good shot at getting the funding.
Do they do design or just the funding? Some of them will do design for you, right? Oh,
Not for that one.
Okay.
That one you need to have you don't need to have something designed necessarily, but you need to describe exactly what it is that you're, the limits, what's going in. It can be something as small as some new striping. It could be something as much as curb changes. Protected bike lane.
Well, it sounds like the Safe Route to Schools funding is, not appropriate now and for the upcoming year. Maybe it is worth thinking about, though, being in contact with Pollard and I guess the high school too, in this future improvement in the biking access to the schools.
Yeah.
And I would think that Justin, the safety committee would also be interested in that. And I mean, we had a horrible accident, obviously, I don't know how many years ago now, on Webster near the high school when a couple of young people died from, that was pedestrian, not biking. But anyway, so there's very strong interest in improving safety, as there should be. So I mean, I don't know anything about all those constraints that you mentioned, but if they're not too onerous, maybe we could think about it in the longer term.
Yeah.
Not in the short.
I'm not discounting it completely. one thing to note is that the Signs in Line program, that's what it's called.
Mhm.
You can get design services through it. The construction is limited to $10,000.
Oh.
So you're talking literally signs and some pavement markings, you know.
Okay, I didn't realize it was that
But the
limited.
design is, right, like, that's a pretty big chunk of, like, your capacity, right? You know, the engineer, like, they'll, I assume the design is like, they will come out and, you know, draw whatever the striping plan is for a road that we're already restriping anyways because we're renovating it. So that $10,000 may be enough to restripe part of the road in a different way if they've already drawn out the plans for it, so.
Yeah, so it says that if you receive the funding, it's not like an either or, it's like, you apply for the project and then they help you with, needs assessment, project design, bid package, and up to $10,000 in cost for the construction, so, the 10,000 doesn't have to cover the entire project, but they'll provide the design services, and it is literally what it says, it's, signs and markings.
Still an awfully small amount of money if it's a lot of work to apply. I don't know if it is or not, but
Yeah, so it's more about, like Tim said, it's kind of more valuable for the
for the design, okay.
But if we chose to design something that required a good amount of investment, then we would be responsible for covering the majority of it.
What's the source of the grant?
Safe
It's,
Routes to School,
yeah, it's
Safe
a
Routes to-
state program.
MassDOT?
messed up. I'm the liaison for Broadmeadow, so
Yeah, it's under.
push that application as long as it's within a half a mile of Broadmeadow.
Yeah,
Which Great Plain is, Great Plain's up for renovation next year, so.
yeah, for whatever reason, the schools that. Like the areas where we would most appreciate the help are the ones that are the least involved. So,
There's also, I think we need to evaluate whether, as we go forward with this, and this may be Shane, this may be Mo as well, Karis, asking for more money, from town meeting, when it comes down to this, because DPW is runs on a very, very razor thin margin. It always has, and it's done a very good job. But, in reality, 86 million goes to the schools, there's significant money that is spent. And I know that transportation infrastructure has always necessarily maybe not been prioritized. And I think that maybe we should make the case to FinCom, make the case to, town meeting that, there could be more allocation done for projects like we're talking about now. So I'm just, it's there.
I
So,
certainly will not turn down.
no, I mean, yeah, we don't, I mean, DPW's always been just, they've been given a budget and, but I think that now it's on a priority. So anyway.
Yeah, I just noticed that they just released a bike racks grant.
Yes, that's been.
Application period opened 3 days ago.
Good.
So, I guess that, we'll call that a close. So we'll get a map from Tyler soon, in a couple hours, and
Yeah, I'll be right back.
of work from, and then
You all have
we'll
one.
just continue the discussion and hopefully get something
Yeah,
on the street in 2025. The next agenda item is the transportation master plan updates regarding the transportation master plan draft scope.
so this will be quick. The only update I have on that is that per Karis, the plan is to fund the scope, the RFP, through chapter 90. That'll give us the most flexibility. In terms of our overall allocation, it's a drop in the bucket kind of. We looked through I've looked through the budget several times now with engineering, talking with the GIS, the GIS person, and we think that there might be some, like, within the actual budget, the tasks might be, there might be some funding that would go from one task to another, but that overall, we're not providing that task by task estimate to the consultants. And we think the budget total is reasonable for the scope of work as depicted. So I think that there's some information that we're gonna stick in there related to the GIS deliverable from the GIS coordinator. But that, other than that, once we get approved for the Chapter 90, you apply, you tell them what you're using the money for, they grant you that, and then you apply for reimbursement. That we should be able to put it out before the end of the year.
So even though you're not going to indicate budgets per task, I'm assuming there are people ask for budgets per task, so you can have a sense of the level of effort for each task or not.
Yeah, we can do that. That isn't, so the actual particulars of the RFP will include this scope, but will not be exclusively limited to the scope. So one of the things that we can put in is a budget proposal broke down by task.
I always think it's a good idea.
Yeah, we usually do that anyway.
Yeah.
Especially if we're able to put down break it down even further and hourly rates and what they're typically we'll ask for like a rate sheet. But using Chapter 90 money, we won't have to wait. The budget was a little bit, it was an option, but it wasn't gonna work based on how much time we had left in the process. So this is the better option for what we're looking for.
Okay, that sounds good. Any discussion about that? Now we'll move on. So the fall semi-annual joint meeting of the transportation committees, the agenda items and format. Justin, do you have an idea of agenda items you'd like to speak about for the Transportation Safety Committee, or Rebecca will speak on your behalf?
Yeah, and I haven't aligned with her yet, but because I wanted to know because this is obviously the first time we're doing our fall meeting, so I don't know what the expectation is from. Do you, Tyler, when you spoke with Karis last time, was there an expectation? I know that there was, maybe because you have more of the budgeted, or you have more of an outlook, because maybe spring was like aspirational, and then fall was like, now you know what you're budgeting for going forward. Like what was do you have any information from Karis, at least what the point of this is? I mean, I know what the charter was. The charter, we're stuck with doing 2 of these. And I mean,
Yeah, so
charged with.
Yeah, so I think that the spring meeting is kind of the follow-up to the fall. Right?
Okay.
So the fall meeting, ideally, we would have done the fall meeting in September, and we would have been able to use that as an opportunity to take into advisement people's perspectives on our capital plan and our street list, our paving list, that kind of thing. Now that we're on the other side of that deadline, I think that it might be more of a literally sharing our priorities, talking about what DPW plans to do in the following year with enough time to actually make some adjustments when we can. and answer questions before it's like, oh, we're starting construction in a month. Which is more of the spring meeting. The spring meeting is like, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
This is what's gonna be happening over the next several months. And maybe, you know, it's not, this isn't dictated anywhere, but maybe a more public facing meeting rather than this one being more of a joint committees strategizing kind of thing.
Sure.
That's my take on it.
And that's
Or
fine. I mean, we can, I mean, I'll talk to Rebecca, but I mean, yes, this meeting, I know I'll be in Florida or, you know, during this, but, yes, this will be, we can certainly discuss what our prioritization from TSC will be. And we have a meeting next week, Tyler?
Next Wednesday.
Yeah, next Wednesday. So certainly we can put that, can we put that on the agenda just to kind of discuss what we want to bring up, and I'll bring Rebecca will be there. So, and I envision it will be, you know, more the quest towards standardization, because we're not necessarily the best on standardization of markings and signage, especially with regards to school zones, et cetera. So I think that's one of the biggest priorities that I think for next year will be school zone standardization. You know, as we said before, you know, each of our schools, when they were designed or last funded, they were put under certain grants, and the standard was either different. So we have school zones that are signed or not signaled or not this. So yes, I think we want to kind of push our priorities to, you know, standardization of school zones, as one of the things that I think TSC could push for. But that's off the top of my head. So I'll talk to the committee. I mean, obviously Gus is there, so you know, we'll talk and see what our priorities would be to bring to the workshop.
Rail trail?
Yeah,
Anything?
I reached out to Stacy, but haven't connected
Okay.
with her first. Yeah. I will say I did have a fairly lengthy conversation with Karis a week or so ago about DPW's view of rail trail projects. And Shane and I, a few months ago, had some interactions as well. So we can kind of report on priorities and things in the works, but there's nothing really short term that because it's 18 months out at minimum for DPW activity on rail trail stuff. Yeah, so that's where it is, but I should hear back from Stacy if she has anything else to say about it, but I don't think so. I think I'm closer to it.
We will
Maybe-
be fixing that small section on the existing trail where the washout is.
Oh,
So
great.
we have a PO that's going through the process right now. We're hoping to get that done before the first of the year.
Oh,
It's
terrific.
not resurfacing the whole
No, no,
trail,
no,
it's
I
just
know.
fixing that section that's washed out.
Just east of Charles River?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Where the outfall comes from the
Yep.
street above, and
Yep,
yeah, so
yep.
we're just addressing
Oh,
that
well, that's
small
great,
section there.
Because that is a bad area.
Yeah.
It's the worst, actually.
Maybe there's, there could be some items that your committee would like assistance on from the other committees or from DPW?
Well, from DPW, yes, and I've been in contact with both Shane and Karis on that in terms of the resurfacing. In terms of the community way. But if I can just divert for a moment, in your listing of trails, it's the Needham Newton Community Way, not the Needham Newton Rail Trail, so
Okay.
we should just call it
Yes.
that thing. Anyway, so on those projects, yes, but those are unfortunately out there in terms of time on the priority list for DPW.
Yeah.
Short term, there are some things, trail maintenance, trail signage. We were waiting for, I think Park and Rec was doing, that had a contract to standardize signage on trails, I believe. I don't know where that stands, but we were waiting for that. And then you need signs on the rail trail. And the kiosk off of Fisher Street has been in disrepair for years now, and we've asked, but not you, we asked when Ed Olson was active on the rail trail committee, but he's no longer there. Anyway, so there are some things that we can use help for, but DPW has been very resource constrained. Though we do have that smallish annual maintenance budget. I think it's $14,000 or $15,000 a year that's been used mostly for mowing and tree work to date. And it obviously wouldn't cover resurfacing or anything major.
Right, I think I had mentioned last meeting or the meeting before that I'm pretty sure that there was a capital article that's been submitted for trail resurfacing.
Yes, it's for 25, 26, yes,
Okay, yeah.
that's the first thing, right?
In the community way, there's a letter at the end of that feasibility study
Right.
about like the next steps.
Right.
Is that like something to bring up, like, or should we be doing some of those? Some of them seem like not really capital intensive, it's just.
Right, it was
communication.
looking at potential funding sources was one of them, but it was also confirming, and I forget who put this in, that the MBTA was okay with us moving forward with this.
Yeah.
And I don't think the town has done that. So yeah, I'll look at that list
Okay.
again.
All right,
Well, sounds like we have some things.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and for our committee, you know, I was thinking we would just talk about our 2025 kind of goals and, maybe 2026. So that we don't end up, in October again, you know, past September, or something. And my first one, was the funding for the transportation master plan, but it sounds like that's already taken care of, so I can, scrape that one from there. But I think, you know, other than our transportation master plan, maybe updating our complete streets prioritization that we talked about a little bit, like just finishing that in 2025. And, the update to the Needham bicycle plan, which we've discussed, are kind of what I see as a couple accomplishable goals in 2025.
Well, I don't know about accomplishable, but can I add something?
Yeah,
The sidewalk removal pilots or sidewalk program, residential sidewalk troubleshoot brainstorm. That is something we need to figure out.
okay,
So there was someone who's coming to there's someone who's coming to the TSC that wants another
Sidewalk extension.
yeah, I'm trying to even think maybe 2,000, maybe 3,000 feet of sidewalk added to our inventory. Maybe even a little more. I have to actually do it on Google Maps, but you know, yes, we need to figure out, and it's in an area that, you know, South Street, you know, where there's right of way for the town to do it, but there's you know, walls and telephone poles and, you know, just stuff that would be significant. Just forget about adding the inventory, but we're being asked to add to inventory, and we haven't necessarily really dealt with what I think was one of the biggest issues when this committee was charged, which was how do we provide DPW with the guidance to reduce, you know, and deprioritize. So I think we need to work on that. I'm not saying that we need to do this and present this to, you know, the public for the meeting, but nonetheless, we do need to revisit this, because I think we've been kind of ignoring it because it's almost an impossible task. But nonetheless, I think we need to kind of evaluate and see what
Been
can.
discussed for many years, so
Yeah,
we might as well.
maybe if all the groups are together and they can brainstorm an idea,
Yeah.
that might stick.
Yeah, because it doesn't even necessarily have to be the removal aspect. I mean, that's one like solution that may work in the favor of the program, but I think just for the last 2-ish years, year and a half, when people call and say, when are you going to be rehabilitating the sidewalk in my residential neighborhood? The party line has been, are there hazards? If so, submit them for work orders, we'll take care of it, but we don't have the funding or the ability to prioritize your residential neighborhood over another. They all need work, they all need help. That is the question, and that has been deferred to, okay, we're setting up this new committee, it's gonna be so great, they're gonna figure out what to do, and eventually, they're not gonna be able to use that excuse anymore, because we just it could, maybe it's talking about requesting funding, maybe it's a separate funding, a pot of funding, and it gets assigned to different areas on a rotating basis, or something like that, right? We just need to focus in on some workable ideas, because right now we're not really close to that.
I think.
Do we have
I
an
think one-
inventory of our sidewalk conditions in the town?
Yes,
And does that inventory include sidewalks we no longer think are necessary?
it does, but those are not called out. It includes all the sidewalks, but it doesn't. We haven't. There are candidate locations, but without a framework for what we'd actually do, it's hard to know. From a constructability standpoint, there are candidate locations where, okay, there's two sides of the sidewalk, and it's a really low volume street, and we think that we could rehabilitate one side, but there's several of those across the town, and we don't have, we don't know which ones to prioritize, other than, okay, it would be good to do a pilot, and
Is there a standard set of criteria
Just-
for making those
Yeah, I'm
decisions?
just gonna say, like, this is the conversation, I think, that maybe is what we're gonna bring to the.
yeah, I
Yeah,
don't think we need to
meeting,
break it open
so,
now.
yeah,
but
Just as background, it would be good to know that going into that
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, I think that's what we were trying to attempt with this, Mo, is that this committee would set that framework up. Here's the criteria of where sidewalk removal would happen. Here's the strategy of to make it happen in what areas. I think that was the vision, is that this committee would set those criterias and set those strategies.
But that would also include which sidewalks get priority for reconstruction.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then take that to the select board would say yes, and then move forward.
Just a comment to build on something Justin said earlier, given that you have, I think it's 40 or 50 years of backlog on sidewalk rehabilitation. I think it may be useful to think about a request for town meeting approval of additional budget. It's not gonna solve it in a year, but if that budget, doubled for sidewalks, for example, you'd have a 25-year as opposed to a 50-year backlog. And there are other priorities too, as Justin was saying, that are underfunded. Moving forward with the bicycle plan, actual implementation and so forth. So, I mean, I don't know if it's the 25, 26, even beyond that, but I think it's worth thinking about, because there are real needs that are.
I think we need a forecast.
Wouldn't that go into the capital plan? Not,
well, we can't ask for funding if we don't know what the program's gonna be yet.
Right. And I think that, historically DPW has been underfunded, whatever, that's fine. That's my personal opinion. But I think that we do need to look at the expansion, especially with the zoning, if this does go through what town meeting does, and there's significantly more zoning, there's more development coming in, there's more commercial development coming in. We need to look at a portion of that pie. Obviously, a portion of that pie needs to go to schools, making sure they're not overcrowded. The portion of the pie needs to go toward infrastructure, et cetera. But yes, it needs to go toward what we're doing here. The plain reality is DPW. The sidewalks are not sustainable. We have reached an unsustainable amount of road, 135 miles. And we cannot keep up with the need for restoring going forward. We need to prioritize that. So yes, we can go through, this committee can go through and figure out what the prioritization is, but I think the reality is we need to potentially reevaluate how much we have asked asked town meeting for allocation every year, because the reality is there hasn't necessarily been a meaningful increase given the expansion of the town, and the prioritization of what we're talking about here, from bikes to multimodal to sidewalks to safe streets. We've infused it into schools, we've infused it into other areas, but the reality is our infrastructure, it does need, and and there are grants available everywhere. We can try to continue to apply more grants, but the reality is I think we need to increase what town meeting allocates to us. So that's my thing, and that's where I would look to Mo on our committee to really kind of help bring the guidance, given your experience with your select board and planning board experience and all of this, to kind of help to see and to frame that conversation for what we can do for our infrastructure. But
So in terms of the joint meeting, I think the question remains, like, do we need to prepare something? Like, I know that for the spring meeting, we did like a presentation. I don't know if that's necessary for this, but is it just as simple as putting the agenda together and talking about it as a group? Am I putting the agenda together?
Who's chairing the meeting?
That's a good question. I mean, it says in the language says it's considered a joint meeting of all
Right.
three committees.
But
I don't-
somebody has to be the chair.
well,
Somebody
normally
has
I would probably weasel my way into that, but I'm not going to be there.
What's that? We have you muted.
You did it last time, Tyler, right? As I recall, you chaired the meeting.
I
or
did a
you facilitated
presentation,
the
but
meeting?
yeah, I think maybe it's.
I can
maybe-
share it, sure. Yeah, I'll do it.
So then the agenda should originate in this group.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, I'm happy to put
In
it together.
consultation with the other, people, but there should be an agenda for the meeting.
Right.
Which means
Yeah.
contacting the other participants and seeing what they would put on that agenda.
Right, I just wanted to confirm that the plan was that, similar to how I do this. You have your priorities, we talk to you. Is that the plan, or?
Yeah, I mean, let's be specific. I think we talked about this a few minutes ago, that each committee that is part of the joint committee is going to say something about their priorities, right?
Yes.
And I think it's useful to, have it in a slide like we did last time. It's not necessary, but it makes it easier for people to follow when you have, very brief. I think we each
Well,
had,
certainly for the public watching the meeting would be helpful.
I think we had at most like 3 slides each or something last time. It wasn't a big
Yeah.
deal. It just helped visualize it.
Sure.
I would
So,
make a
who's making it?
Go ahead, Duncan.
I'd offer that the last meeting came across as seriously, pavement oriented, let's call it. And, everybody wants to know about that. I would like to think that, just to sort of memorialize that we have a mandate that's a little larger than that. And I think there are 2 topics that can be said. We've already mentioned one, which is just, where is the community way at? I know it's not ours at this point, but it's there, and someday it's going to be a part of the trail picture. And then, maybe try not to totally ignore transit, and maybe say something about the quiet zone.
So last time, people sent me information. And then I put it in a slideshow. Is
Okay.
that what we wanna do again?
I sent you slides, as I
Yeah.
recall.
Yeah,
Not just
I think
information.
I
Maybe incorporate. it
standardized
into
it or
yours.
something.
Yeah, that might be, yeah.
Okay, yes.
Is that what we wanna do?
Yeah, let's do that.
I mean, you've got 2 weeks at your workload, so the question is, what can you do that would not overburden?
I think as long as
Yeah, take-
everybody has their agenda items or what they want to put on there, and then that's.
Just a response to Duncan about the quiet zone. I mean, there's a whole committee working on that, correct? And
Oh,
if
yeah,
they're
I
not-
mean, there's a committee, they're, just about to get
Right.
you know, a-
But they're not part of
RFP
this
out on that.
committee, so I'm just wondering whether we should be reporting on.
I would suggest that we stick to things that are relative to the committees that are part of the joint committee. The quiet zone is on a separate track with a separate committee that TSC isn't touching, we're not touching as part of this, and the rail trail's not touching, so I think it's nice to have that thought, but I think that this joint committee meeting really needs to be updates on what each committee is doing and how we are working together jointly for a comprehensive.
But to Duncan's point, if the work of, or if the implementation of the quiet zone has any bearing on our work
Right,
going forward, if they're going to affect the access along streets, because it crosses streets.
I don't think we're there yet, though.
Yeah,
So then
yeah.
maybe that statement should be made and we shouldn't address it in the meeting.
right.
You
One
can-
thought is
You
to
can argue it
just
both ways, yeah.
mention that the quiet zone committee exists. It's not part of this working group and it's
And
in
we're
process.
keeping our eye on the
Yeah.
implications it has on the work that we're doing.
Yeah, but
We can discuss that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then people will send me stuff and I'll do what I did.
Okay, so Tyler, when do you need that? Because to Mo's point, we're 2 weeks out. And you have other job responsibilities as well, so what I
We
don't
talked-
wanna have happen is you get bombarded and now
Right.
you're. Trying to squeeze this all in at the 11th hour. So when
So,
do you need all that information? Cause we also need to get that into the packet. So this isn't just a slideshow, we need to include that slideshow as part of the packet
Right.
for that agenda.
so is it reasonable to say next Wednesday?
Sure.
Yeah.
That gives us a weekend, 2 days.
Yep, that's fine.
Justin here.
Justin
heard
was
that?
plugging it
What's
in.
that?
You heard that deadline?
Next Wednesday,
Um,
yes, next Wednesday is TSC's meeting.
Oh, right, so maybe, Thursday, maybe Thursday then, cause I do have to. You know, like Shane said, we do have to post the actual agenda.
48 hours?
48 hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what, we should have plenty of time, but I do wanna,
So you need everything by the 14th of November.
yes,
Yeah, I can have stuff from TSC. I can bring Rebecca in. I can give you stuff from Quiet Zone, or Duncan can. I mean, we both sit on it. And there have been some updates. We can give
Yeah,
you.
that's all I was thinking of, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's the consultant has been figured out, and they're working on some things. So, yeah.
I will entertain.
I
motion to
have
adjourn.
one
Oh, go
other
ahead.
thing. I was just looking at our webpage. Our webpage needs to be updated. It is not up to date with the members of the committee, so I'm not sure who.
So I have a question about that because, some people moved around a bit.
Yes.
So I think Paul. I'm not sure if. What is your standing in the committee right now? Are you at large representative or what is?
Yeah, I think so. That's my understanding.
Here's Blaine.
Yep, I think Paul's at large now because I moved to
So right now
planning
it
board rep.
has. Right now it has Tim as the chair. Mo is our rep to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Where did this come from?
Duncan is the rep to the MBTA Advisory Committee. Paul is
This
the
is.
rep to
this
the
is up-
Boston MPO.
Oh, yeah, I've updated it since then.
Gus, we don't have you down yet on this.
So Gus was just appointed
Yeah.
recently, so I had held
Yeah.
off because.
So
And
we
then
can pile all
James
the
Rail
work.
Trail, Justin Planning Board. Stephen, you're for climate action, correct?
That's right.
That says vacant still.
I think I just need to add Gus and Steven.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
good, so I was TSC and then I moved to planning board because planning board changed, or the charter was
Yeah,
changed.
changed that,
So
right?
yeah, so yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
And Paul, are you still the Boston MPO representative?
No, I requested to, or decided to leave that.
Okay,
The meeting
So then-
times, yeah.
so you're the at large, I gotcha, okay,
So then that means that
There's an open
that's
seat.
vacant.
that's
Yeah.
vacant.
Yeah.
we also need to just communicate this because I believe if I'm not mistaken, Miles in town manager's office is the one soliciting to get people on the committee.
Okay.
They have to.
Yeah,
He should be
post
aware
it.
of this by now, Shane.
Last to appoint.
Yeah, no,
So we
Shane,
need-
he's aware of Gus's appointment. He's aware of my transfer from TSC to yeah.
But I'm not sure he's aware of Paul coming off
Yeah.
the MPO. So Paul would need.
Oh,
to be
yeah, I've
slotted
I've
from the
communicated with
MPO.
Miles.
Yeah, I think he is. But yeah,
Oh, okay.
we can confirm, but yeah, I think he is.
Yeah, I don't know if it was ever fixed.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everything is
Okay.
where it needs to
Yep.
be and currently it's not.
Okay,
And so Stephen and Gus appointed in 24 through 27, is that correct?
Should be, yes.
Probably,
Okay.
yeah.
Uh,
Has everyone been sworn in, by the way?
Yes.
no. I didn't swear in.
To go to,
Well,
please. I have,
I'm
by the
just-
way, I have 5 committees that I still haven't sworn myself in for, so it doesn't need to be, I'm sworn into 3 of them, but
Wow, good thing you only have to do the ethics training once.
yes, that is true.
Every 2 years, every 2 years.
Oh, yes,
Oh,
just
okay.
did it.
Yeah,
Yeah, you just go to town hall, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So to
Yeah.
the clerk's office.
Dr. Louise, yeah.
I would wait till after the election.
Yes, don't bother her now.
Don't go near the place tomorrow. No, God.
And
Yeah,
after the potential referendum, just let it go. Just let's,
all right, now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
second.
Okay, so we'll take a roll call vote, Mo Handle,
Yes.
James Goldstein,
Yes.
Gus Strikeman.
Yes.
Tim Bolger, chair votes aye, Duncan Allen,
Aye.
Stephen Frail,
Aye.
Justin McCullen.
Aye.
All right, motion passes, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Well done.
Everybody.
Thanks all.
Everyone.
Take care.
Well,